solving inequalities, by multiplying or dividing. And for the most part, this is going to be just like solving an equation, for the most part. There's one other tricky little thing. If I had 3x is less than 12, or if I had 2x is, let's say, greater than or equal to -8, that's not going to be any different than solving regular equations. Okay. Here we're just going to divide both sides of that inequality by 3, and so x is less than 4. If I were to graph x is less than 4, is there going to be an open circle on the graph or closed? Open. So if I graph this, remember, just put your 0 there. Here's 4, an open circle, and I want values less than that. And that's if they ask you to graph. And for this problem here, the second one, no problem here. We just divide by 2. And x is greater than or equal to -4. And when I graph with a less than or equal sign, there's your 0, here's your -4. We fill in that circle. And I want values greater than that. Okay? Those are inequalities. Let's take a division one. Let's say w over 3 is less than 2. Some number w less than divided by 3 is less than 2. And how do we solve that problem? Yeah, Austin. Okay, so we're going to multiply both sides of this inequality by 3. And you'll notice that it's the same thing as solving a regular equation, with one exception, which we'll cover that in a minute. The 3's here will cancel, and w is less than 6. We know how to graph that, right? If I had 2/3 x is greater than or equal to 15. Austin, what do we do there? What do we do to get rid of that 2/3? Multiplied by what? You're right, multiply by the reciprocal. Very good. So we're going to multiply by 3 over 2 and both sides. All right, so and when we multiply a number by the reciprocal, we get 1. And when we multiply the right side by the reciprocal, what we're doing is we're just going to multiply across the top. And we can put this over 1 if we want. 15 times 3 is 45. And 1 times 2 is 2. And we can write it as 45 over 2.
I didn't get that.
What didn't you get?
What did you cross multiply?
I did not cross multiply. Cross multiply would be 15 times 2. When you multiply fractions, you multiply numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. Multiplying fractions. I know you guys like to use your calculators here, but that's fairly simple. Yes? No, it is simplified. Simplified could mean reducing. If you want to change it to 22.5, that's not really simplifying. 45 over 2 is a good answer. You leave it like that. Okay? All right, so for the exception, let's take -2x is less than 10. Okay? Now how do we solve that? Luke? Divide by -2. The problem here is when we have an inequality and we divide by a negative. Does anybody remember what you do? When you divide by a negative? Yes. Well, you do. You bring the negative to the top, the negative 2 over negative 2 will cancel out, and 10 divided by negative 2 will give you, now that you can simplify, and that'll be negative 5. However, because we divided by a negative, we have to reverse the inequality sign. And now it's greater than negative 5. And so the rule is going to be whenever we multiply or divide an inequality by a negative, reverse the inequality sign. So whenever we multiply or divide by a negative, you have to flip the inequality sign.
Are you doing a multiplication one?
If we had a problem like, take negative 3/4 x is greater than or equal to 9. Okay? And Austin, you did this last one okay when we had fractions. What's the first thing we would do here?
Make reciprocal.
All right, and you're right. And what is the reciprocal of negative 3/4? Negative 4/3. That's right. And when I multiply a fraction by its reciprocal, I'll get 1. Negative times a negative is 1. Right? So I will get 1x. And if I multiply the left side by the reciprocal, I have to multiply the right side. And because I multiplied by a negative, okay, well, 9 times negative 4 is negative 36 over 3, which is negative 12. Okay? And I have to reverse the inequality sign. So instead of greater than or equal to, it is less than or equal to. And we multiply 9 times negative 4/3, you're going to get negative 12. And so I want x values less than or equal to negative 12. All right. We got the 9 times negative 4/3. 9 times negative 4 is negative 36 over 3. We'll give you the negative 12. Yes, Austin?
So basically, if there's a negative on this side, you just have to flip it?
Yes. Well, I don't want to say if there's a negative on either side.
No, never mind.
Okay, but if you do multiply or divide by a negative to solve this inequality, you have to flip the sign. And I'm glad you brought that up, because there might be a little bit of confusion here. If I were to have, I think that's real easy to read. X is greater than 5. Putting that on a number line is no big deal. But if I had, Zach, how would you read that? 7/3 is less than y, and how would you graph it? Would you have, first of all, an open circle or closed circle? Open circle at 7/3. There's 7/3, an open circle. And now, which way would you make your arrow? Would you make it to the left or to the right? To the right. Yeah, because if you're reading from the variable, y is greater than 7/3, reading from right to left. Because this inequality is the same as y is greater than 7/3. These are both the same inequality. So sometimes when that variable's over on the right side, it's not quite as easy to understand as if it's on the left side. Okay? But you can always switch it if you want. All right. So let's go back to the other screen here. Is there any questions on multiplying or dividing? All right? The only trick is when you multiply by a negative, be careful. If I write 5x is less than or equal to negative 25, am I going to reverse the inequality sign when I divide? Am I?
No.
No.
Because you're reading from the variable.
Well, no, that's not the
You're
reason.
dividing by
Because I'm dividing by 5, I'm not dividing by a negative. Even though there's a negative over on the right side, I'm not, when I divide, I'm going to divide by a 5, not a negative. Okay? Yes, sir.
Why do we have to put that? Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, there is a reason. And let's take, I'm glad you brought that up. Let's take a real simple problem. Let's take negative 2x is less than 8. Okay? And we want to put this on a number line. Here's 0. And when you divide by a negative 2, I'm saying you have to reverse that inequality sign, right? So x is greater than negative 4, correct? Well, let's take the negative 4, put an open circle, and let's graph it. What the arrow means is that every value greater than negative 4 will solve this inequality. Can you give me a number that's greater than negative 4? Negative 3. So negative 2 times negative 3 is? No. Negative 2 times negative 3 is 6. Is that less than 8? Yes. No matter what number you pick, wherever this arrow is above the number line, whatever number you pick is going to be a solution here. Let's pick a number over here. Let's pick positive 3. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. Yeah, that's less than 8, isn't it? So that's the reason why we have to flip that sign. So we get all the values that we need. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, for your homework tonight, we're going to do our changes 366 and 367, problems 3 through 37, and that'll be due on Wednesday.